All right, so get ready, because today we're diving into a controversy you might not expect, the origins of Einstein's theory of relativity.
Mm.
Yeah, you sent over some really thought-provoking research,
Yeah.
including a paper that suggests Einstein may not have been the sole author of his groundbreaking work, so.
It's a captivating topic for sure.
Yeah,
Einstein, the iconic image of genius, it's almost unthinkable to challenge that.
exactly, but that's what this research is all about.
Right.
This paper by Gabriela Atanasiou, she's a PhD and director of research at the Technical University of Iași,
Okay.
and she claims that a French mathematician, Henri Poincaré, actually developed key concepts of relativity before Einstein.
Interesting. And Atanasiou, she makes a strong case for Poincaré's contributions. He's often overlooked.
Right.
He was presenting ideas about relativity years before Einstein's famous 1905 paper.
Yeah, and she even highlights a conference in St. Louis where Poincaré discussed these concepts.
Right. And what's particularly intriguing is a memo that Poincaré sent to another physicist, Lorentz, in 1904. It seems to outline core principles of relativity.
Wow, so if Poincaré was circulating these ideas, why does Einstein get all the credit?
Right.
Atanasiou suggests there was a deliberate effort to sideline Poincaré, especially within German physics circles.
Hmm.
So,
And this is where the plot thickens.
okay.
Atanasiou points to the University of Göttingen, a renowned center of mathematics in Germany at the time. She paints a picture of really intense academic rivalry, particularly between Germany and France.
Ah, so we're not just talking about scientific ideas here, but national pride.
Exactly. It was a period of heightened tensions between the two countries, and Atanasiou argues that this rivalry played a role in the alleged suppression of Poincaré's work.
Right, and the alleged mastermind behind all of this, David Hilbert, the head of Göttingen's mathematics department.
Oh, wow.
Atanasiou claims Hilbert had a motive. He had lost a prestigious prize to, you guessed it, Poincaré.
Oh, it's a dramatic narrative, but if we're playing devil's advocate for a second,
Okay.
how plausible is a conspiracy like this?
Good point. What evidence does Atanasiou even have for this supposed plot?
Well, she highlights the lack of reviews of Poincaré's publications in prominent German physics journals. Given their usual meticulousness, the omission seems suspicious to Atanasiou.
Okay, so it's not just about one overlooked paper, but a pattern of ignoring
Yes.
Poincaré's contributions.
Exactly. Atanasiou suggests this wasn't an oversight, but a calculated effort to keep Poincaré's work out of the spotlight.
Wow. Okay, so we have a potential motive and some suggestive evidence.
Yeah.
But where does Einstein fit into all of this?
Well, Atanasiou argues that Einstein was the perfect candidate for this alleged scheme.
Okay.
He was a relatively unknown patent clerk at the time.
So he wasn't part of the established academic elite. A plagiarism scandal wouldn't have had the same impact on him as it would on someone else.
That's Atanasiou's line of reasoning. She suggests that Hilbert and others at Göttingen, they needed someone to publish Poincaré's ideas under their own name. Someone who could, fly under the radar.
So Einstein, with his relative obscurity and his connections to, influential figures like Max Planck, fit the bill.
Precisely. Now, it's important to acknowledge, though, that Atanasiou's theory is just that, a theory.
Right.
It's a compelling narrative, but we need to examine it critically.
Absolutely. Before we get swept up by the intrigue,
Yeah.
we have to ask, how solid is the evidence for this deliberate suppression of Poincaré's work? And how plausible is a conspiracy to steal his ideas and hand them to Einstein?
These are crucial questions.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that Atanasiou isn't alone in highlighting Poincaré's contributions.
Right.
Other mathematicians, like Edmund Whittaker, have also written about Poincaré and Lorentz's significant role in shaping the ideas that would become the theory of relativity.
So this is not just some fringe theory, but a perspective that's been raised by respected figures in the field.
Exactly. And it suggests that the story of relativity's development is more complex than the traditional narrative of Einstein as a lone genius.
Right. All right. So we've set the stage,
Yeah.
introduced the players, laid out the controversy.
Yep.
Now let's dig deeper into Atanasiou's portrayal of Einstein himself.
Okay.
She challenges the image of him as this brilliant prodigy and paints a very different picture of his academic abilities and early professional life.
Indeed, Atanasiou highlights a stark contrast between Einstein's supposed lack of early brilliance and his sudden burst of groundbreaking publications in 1905.
His miracle year.
Yes.
It is remarkable, especially when you consider that he was working full-time at the patent office during this period. Makes you wonder where these groundbreaking ideas came from.
That's the question Atanasiu aims to answer.
Okay.
And she suggests that the answer lies in the alleged plagiarism of Poincaré's work.
Okay, so let's dive into Atanasiu's depiction of Einstein and see if her claims hold up under scrutiny. You mentioned she highlights his less than stellar academic record.
Right.
What are some of the details she brings up?
Well, she points out that Einstein's early years weren't exactly marked by academic brilliance.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she even mentions that he was considered mentally slow as a child.
What?
Yeah, because he didn't start speaking until he was 5.
Wow, that's quite a contrast to the image of Einstein as a child prodigy.
Exactly. She also notes that he left school at 15 without a diploma.
So no straight-A student coasting through prestigious schools.
Not exactly, no. Atanasiu even digs up a quote from Einstein himself, published in a school newspaper, where he admits to lacking imagination and practical skills. Not exactly the traits you associate with, a future scientific revolutionary.
Right. It's fascinating how much our perception of Einstein is shaped by the narrative of him as this solitary genius. Atanasiu seems determined to dismantle that.
She certainly does. She goes on to describe Einstein's struggles to even get into a university.
Oh, wow.
He initially failed the entrance exam for the Zurich Polytechnic, the only institution at the time that didn't require a high school diploma.
Interesting. And what's interesting is that the exam was largely made up of math problems. You'd think a future physics icon wouldn't have trouble with that.
Right. It's a detail Atanasiu uses to suggest that Einstein's mathematical abilities weren't as strong as the traditional narrative might lead us to believe.
So if he wasn't a mathematical whiz kid, how did he eventually get into university?
He retook the exam and passed the second time.
Okay.
But Atanasiu emphasizes that even as a student, he wasn't exactly a star performer. She mentions that he relied heavily on his friend and classmate, Marcel Grossman, who later helped him secure the patent office job.
Okay, so we're seeing a pattern here.
Right.
Einstein, according to Atanasiu, wasn't a standout student or a natural academic.
Exactly. And she highlights how even after graduating, he struggled for years to secure a university position.
So he's working at this patent office, seemingly far removed from the world of groundbreaking physics research. And yet, in 1905, he publishes 4 revolutionary papers. Establishing him as one of the leading thinkers of his time, it does seem like quite a leap.
It does indeed, and this is precisely the point Atanasiu emphasizes.
Right.
She argues that this sudden burst of productivity, especially while working full-time at the patent office, is difficult to reconcile with the image of Einstein she's presented.
Right.
Someone who struggled academically and professionally.
I'm starting to see where she's going with this. If Einstein wasn't this lone genius toiling away in obscurity, where do these groundbreaking ideas come from? Is that where the alleged plagiarism of Poincaré comes in?
That's the crux of Atanasiu's argument. She contends that Einstein, perhaps desperate for recognition and success, might have been willing to take a shortcut, appropriating Poincaré's work and presenting it as his own.
It's a bold accusation, and one that forces us to reconsider everything we think we know about Einstein and the birth of relativity. But before we jump to conclusions, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are other perspectives on Einstein's journey.
Right.
Some historians argue that his unconventional path, his time spent outside academia, might have actually contributed to his unique insights.
That's a valid point. It's possible that those years at the patent office, grappling with practical problems, exposed him to different ways of thinking. Perhaps that experience, combined with his deep interest in physics, allowed him to approach the problems of space and time in a fresh and revolutionary way.
So maybe his distance from the traditional academic world gave him a unique perspective, a freedom to think outside the box that he wouldn't have had within the confines of a university setting.
Exactly. There's also the argument that Einstein's early struggles might have freed him from some of the constraints of conventional thinking in physics at the time. He wasn't bound by the same assumptions or entrenched ideas, allowing him to develop more radical concepts.
It's fascinating to think that what Atanasiu presents as evidence of Einstein's lack of brilliance could be interpreted as the very factors that allowed him to break new ground.
It highlights how the same set of facts can be interpreted in different ways, leading to very different conclusions.
Right, and it underscores the importance of considering multiple perspectives, especially when dealing with a complex and controversial topic like this. But even if we acknowledge that Einstein's unique experiences might have contributed to his thinking, it doesn't fully address the question of whether his work on relativity was truly original.
That's right, and Atanasiu anticipates this counterargument.
Okay.
She dedicates a significant portion of her paper to analyzing Einstein's 1905 papers on relativity, comparing them to Poincaré's earlier publications. She argues that the similarities in concepts and even language are too striking to be mere coincidence.
So she's not just saying Einstein was influenced by Poincaré, but that he directly lifted ideas and even phrases. That's a serious accusation.
It is, and it's one that has been met with both skepticism and support within the scientific community. There are those who find Atanasiu's analysis compelling, seeing it as evidence of intellectual dishonesty on Einstein's part. But there are also many who vehemently disagree,
Right.
arguing that while there are undoubtedly similarities, Einstein's work represents a significant conceptual leap beyond Poincaré's ideas.
It seems we're left with two competing narratives, both supported by their own sets of evidence and interpretations.
Yeah.
On one hand, we have Atanasiu's story of plagiarism and ambition, challenging the traditional view of Einstein as a lone genius. On the other hand, we have those who maintain that while Poincaré made important contributions, Einstein's work went far beyond, simply rehashing existing ideas.
Exactly. And it's important to acknowledge that this debate isn't just about historical accuracy.
Right.
It touches on fundamental questions about the nature of scientific discovery, the role of collaboration, and the often messy process by which knowledge is created and disseminated.
It's a reminder that the history of science is rarely a neat and tidy narrative.
Yeah.
It's a story full of twists and turns, competing claims, and the complexities of human ambition and intellectual rivalry.
Precisely. And in the case of Einstein and Poincaré, we're dealing with two brilliant minds, both grappling with some of the most fundamental questions about the universe. The debate over who deserves credit for what might never be fully resolved. But what we can do is explore the evidence, engage with the different perspectives, and appreciate the complexity of this fascinating chapter in the history of science.
And speaking of complexity, there's one more fascinating aspect of Atanasiu's argument that we need to address. The role of Einstein's first wife, Mileva Maric.
Ah, yes, the enigmatic Mileva. Atanasiu delves into her story as well, suggesting that Maric, who was also a physicist, may have played a more significant role in the development of Einstein's theories than is commonly acknowledged.
I've heard this theory before, that Maric was the true genius behind the work, but Einstein took all the credit. Is that what Atanasiu is suggesting?
She's careful not to make such a definitive claim.
Okay.
While there's evidence that Maric was a brilliant student and that she collaborated with Einstein on some of his early work, the extent of her contributions to his later breakthroughs, particularly relativity, remains a matter of debate. There's limited concrete evidence to definitively prove or disprove her involvement in those specific theories.
Still, it's an intriguing possibility that adds another layer of complexity to this already fascinating story. It makes you wonder about the unseen contributions of women in science throughout history.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that the history of scientific discovery is often a collaborative endeavor, even if those collaborations aren't always recognized or documented.
So we've explored Atanasiu's arguments, examined the evidence, and considered alternative perspectives. Where do we go from here? How do we, as informed listeners, navigate this complex and often contentious debate?
Well, I think it's important to remember that this isn't just a historical debate about who deserves credit for what.
Right.
The questions raised by Atanasiu have implications for how we understand the process of scientific discovery itself.
That's an important point. It's not just about Einstein and Poincaré, but about how we approach the history of science and how we attribute credit for groundbreaking ideas. What are some key takeaways you think our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that scientific progress is rarely a solitary endeavor. It's a collaborative process built on the work of countless individuals, each adding their own piece to the puzzle.
I agree. We often focus on the big names,
Right.
the Einsteins of the world. But the reality is that scientific breakthroughs are almost always the result of many minds working together.
Sharing ideas, challenging each other, and building upon each other's discoveries.
And in the case of relativity, we've seen that there were many contributors. We've
Oh.
talked about Poincaré and Einstein.
Right.
But there are others, like Hendrik Lorentz and Hermann Minkowski, who played crucial roles.
Absolutely. Lorentz, a Dutch physicist,
Mhm.
he developed the mathematical transformations that became central to special relativity. And Minkowski, a German mathematician, he provided the geometric framework for understanding spacetime, essentially giving us the concept of a four-dimensional universe where space and time are intertwined.
So even if we accept Athanasius' argument that Einstein might have drawn from Poincaré's work, it's clear that he was part of a larger scientific community,
Right.
a network of minds grappling with the same fundamental questions.
Precisely. And this raises a fascinating question.
Okay.
Does it really matter who gets the ultimate credit for a scientific discovery, as long as the knowledge advances and humanity benefits from these new understandings?
That's a tough one.
Hmm.
On the one hand, it seems fair to acknowledge and celebrate the contributions of all those who played a role, especially when we're talking about a theory as revolutionary as relativity.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, our culture often gravitates toward these singular figures,
Right.
these icons of genius, like Einstein.
Right.
It's as if we need these heroes of science to inspire us.
It's a complex issue, and perhaps the most important takeaway is to appreciate that science is a collaborative enterprise.
Right.
Whether we're talking about relativity or any other major scientific breakthrough,
Right.
it's essential to remember that behind those discoveries are communities of researchers, each contributing their expertise, their insights, and often years of dedicated work.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are your final thoughts for our listener? What should they take away from this exploration of the Einstein-Poincaré controversy?
Well, I think this case serves as a powerful reminder that the history of science is rarely simple or straightforward. It's a story filled with nuance, with moments of brilliance, collaboration, and yes, even instances of ambition and rivalry. And as informed individuals, we need to approach these stories with a critical eye, examining the evidence, considering multiple perspectives, and being willing to challenge our own assumptions.
I couldn't agree more. It's easy to get swept up in the traditional narratives, the stories of lone geniuses who single-handedly revolutionize our understanding of the world.
Mhm.
But as we've seen today, the reality is often much more complex and fascinating.
And I would encourage our listener to continue exploring this debate.
Yeah.
Delve into the original sources. Read the works of Poincaré, Einstein, Lorentz, Minkowski. Form your own opinions based on the evidence, and don't be afraid to question the accepted narrative. Who knows, maybe you'll uncover some new insights or perspectives that challenge our current understanding of this pivotal moment in scientific history.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a reminder that learning is a lifelong journey. And even in a field as seemingly settled as physics, there's always more to discover, more to question, and more to debate.
Precisely. And that's what makes it so exciting.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. It's been a real pleasure exploring this fascinating controversy with you.
Thank you. It's always stimulating to delve into these complex historical and scientific questions.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this intellectual adventure. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and encouraged you to continue exploring the world with a critical and inquisitive mind. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.